On Close Up, we start with war in Israel, hostages being held in Gaza, and America divided over how to respond. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a high-ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, joins us this morning to discuss that and more. Senator, thank you for being here.
Nice to be here.
So, Israel suffered a blatant and brutal attack on October 7th, but how judicious do you think Israel needs to be in its next steps here, especially as the IDF tries to, decapitate Hamas without inflicting too many civilian casualties?
Well, of course, that's the challenge. Hamas really unleashed a brutal and barbarous attack that killed 1,400 Israelis on October the 7th. This is a response to what Hamas has done, and very sadly, the Palestinians who occupy Gaza are being used as pawns in this war. And so it's very unfortunate. We need to see a pause in the fighting so we can let people out, so that we can let humanitarian aid in, and so we can help those Palestinians who are caught in the middle.
Yeah, where should those refugees go, essentially? We see Egypt not offering much help.
Well, that's one of the challenges. They're being told to go to the south of Gaza, but that's really problematic in a piece of territory the size of Gaza with this kind of fighting. And Hamas is really, they're dug in under hospitals, under schools, under residences in the region, so that it's very difficult to find them. I think we all agree Israel has a right to defend itself, and they need to do that, but they have an obligation also to try and reduce civilian casualties as much as possible.
The hostages being held, is there any sense if there are still any American citizens among those folks?
I understand that we think there may be. It's very hard to get information. I had a chance last week to meet with some of the families of hostages. They were mostly Israeli, but they were very concerned because they just can't get information out. And we had a chance to meet with the Israeli ambassador to the United States earlier this week, those of us on the Foreign Relations Committee, and he also didn't have any information.
Yeah, very nebulous at this point. From what you see at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, what is the risk of this conflict spreading regionally and perhaps drawing the U.S. in as well?
Well, that's the concern. I think the administration has been prudent in sending 2 carrier strike groups to the region. As a show of force, we've put some more F-16s in the region, put some more troops in, but as we know, Iranian-backed militias have already fired on our troops in Syria and Iraq. So this has the potential to escalate. Now, we are hearing from Hassan Nasrallah this morning, who is the head of Hezbollah. It will be very interesting to see what he has to say. Early indications are that Hezbollah is not interested in expanding the war into northern Israel and Lebanon, but things are so unsettled that you don't know how to keep things from getting out of control because Iran doesn't have full control of these militias that they're backing. They don't have control of Hamas, of Hezbollah, and so it's very difficult, and that's why it's so important for us to work with our allies to have a show of force in the region.
As much focus as there has been on the 10/7 attack and its barbarism, a music festival, people being massacred there, murdering children, the taking of hostages, it seems notable that a significant number of people here in the United States see the violence as morally justified. Were you surprised by that at all?
I think that's a small minority of people who see that kind of violence as being justified. I've had a chance to meet with members of the Muslim community here, with Jewish leaders in New Hampshire, and everybody I've talked to, while they have strong feelings about what's happening, they have all decried the violence, the inhumanity of what's happening. and what happened on October the 7th.
Right, and parallel to all of this, we've seen this rise in anti-Semitism that's been happening even leading up to, but now it's really seemed to explode in the advent since this attack, especially on college campuses. You know, you were once the director of the Kennedy School of Government, and I'm curious for your perspective on what's gone on there, where you know, they had a student group and a number of students there that signed on to a statement after the attack saying, quote, they hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence.
And again, it's unfortunate. I headed the Institute of Politics, which was really focused on the undergraduate students there at the Kennedy School. And we tried to bring in people who could present all sides of an issue. We had a very distressing letter from a young woman who's a constituent, who's a student at Cornell, sharing with us her fears. She's a Jewish student. She talked about being afraid to go outside of her dorm where she's living, about being afraid to go to the dining hall, about her friends who are also afraid. That should not happen. We need to make a very strong statement that that kind of anti-Semitism is not acceptable in the United States of America, just like Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hate is not acceptable in the United States. And it's important for us as leaders to take a stand against that, to say we're not going to tolerate that. I'm pleased that the person on Cornell's campus who was responsible for some of those hate statements and writings that were put out has been arrested now and is in jail. But it's unfortunate, and it speaks to the lack of an ability for us to talk to each other, to recognize that we may disagree on things, but we don't have to hate each other. We don't have to use violence as a way to address our disagreements.
How does this war in Israel impact the dynamic of America's involvement with the war in Ukraine?
Well, make no mistake, the nexus between the war in Ukraine and what's happening in the Middle East is Iran. And it's a fight about whether we are going to support civilized society, democracies, or are we going to support terrorist groups and autocrats like Vladimir Putin? And it's not just Putin and Hamas who are watching what happens here. It's China, Xi Jinping, it is North Korea, it's Iran for sure, and it's important for us all of us who believe in a civilized world, who believe in democracy, who believe in the norms of society, that we stand together against this barbarism, against these attacks.
And the Speaker of the House just got an Israel-only aid package across the finish line in the House, $14.5 billion. Your party in the Senate obviously wants a more comprehensive package, aid to Ukraine, a humanitarian aid to Gaza, I think even some border funding as well. How is this going to be received?
There's also the Senate package that we got from the administration also has some funding to address the Indo-Pacific, so Taiwan.
Well, so there's a lot there. So
That's
how
right.
do you think it's going to be received in the Senate when the House sends over this Israel-only bill?
Oh, I think it's dead on arrival. I think, and there is strong bipartisan support in the Senate for combining aid for Israel, for the Indo-Pacific, for the border, with support for Ukraine. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, has been very strong on this, as have so many other Republican senators.
Do you worry that the new Speaker is going to want to put his foot down here and kind of draw a line in the sand, being the new guy on the block?
Well, hopefully he will understand that legislation is all about compromise. It's about working together and seeing what we can get done.
We're hearing the word stalemate brought up in relation to Ukraine more and more. Is your contention that the American financial commitment to Ukraine should be open-ended for as long as it takes for them to fend off the Russians?
I think it is in America's interest to support a Ukrainian victory, to support Ukraine in this fight against Vladimir Putin, who is a vicious dictator who is doing in Ukraine. He's killing civilians indiscriminately. He's undermining their infrastructure. And make no mistake, our allies throughout Eastern Europe, our NATO allies, the Baltic states who are NATO allies, they are very worried about what happens if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine. He's going to come for the Baltics, he's going to come for Poland, he's going to come for other Eastern European countries, because he's already said that. He said he wants to recreate the Soviet Empire. So it's in our interest to stop him now. It's just like for those of us who remember history, who remember what happened when we failed to stop Hitler. If we fail to stop Putin, what does that say to China in terms of their designs on Taiwan? What does it say to North Korea? What does it say to Iran as all of those countries try and take over other countries and determine for them rather than for their letting their citizens determine what their future is?
More particular to the Senate, amid all of this, you have your colleague Senator Bob Menendez indicted on bribery charges, also charged with being an unregistered agent of Egypt. Should he be attending classified briefings under this cloud of suspicion?
Well, as I think you know, Adam, I'm on the Ethics Committee, and as a result of that, I'm prohibited from speaking about anything that comes before the committee, and that means the Menendez matter as well.
And when do you expect to hear something on that?
Again, I'm prohibited from talking about that.
So stay tuned, I guess. All right.